Hi, I'm back on the SAT essay. It's something that not everybody takes. It's an opportunity if you're a good writer, you want to show off your skills there. It's also something a lot of people don't know how to prepare for. So some of my friends on the Reddit SAT RSAT sub have asked me to help out on going over some strategies and approaches. I ran a video which you should watch first. This is the second of three videos uh, reviewing general approaches to rhetorical analysis and using some of the language of Aristotelian ethos, logos, pathos, and applying those to a reading of the practice test 1 essay, which is an essay by Jimmy Carter on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So today what I'm going to do is work on logical fallacies and apply that to a negative reading of practice test 10. Remember, you don't have to agree that these essays are persuasive. Your job, as we went over in the first video, is to give an analysis of the effectiveness of the persuasion of the essay. Okay, now on the third video, I'm going to go through a couple sample essays from the SAT. They publish those on their website to show not only just the grading rubric, but they're examples of student work, and we can see what kind of convinced the readers, the teachers who graded them to think that these are really great or really poor essays. And so there's a certain technique that comes out of there, which I want you to be aware of. Okay, so let's get going on logical fallacies. The idea isn't persuasion, is especially on that logos, but also in ethos and pathos, we have logic, and ethical, an idea of credentials of the speaker, commonly held values is an ethos, and pathos is emotional. You can make really illogical or ineffective, pathetic or emotional appeals. And you can make a misconstrue an ethos as well. So these are all part of things we can bring into a criticism based upon, in general, logical fallacies. And if you look it up, there's formal, informal, there's all kinds of categories of logical fallacies, but we're not going to get into that. Just want to go over a couple of the ones that are useful to keep in mind, and I'll apply them into this reading we're going to look at today. So we may know some of these Latin terms: ad hominem, ad populum, ad nauseam. That's not going to come up here. A little bit ad nauseum, which is the idea that you just repeat something over and over again. If you look at that test 1 essay passage by Jimmy Carter, frankly, when I read it, he's kind of ad nauseum about, oh, how wonderful the caribou are. It's like, okay, Jimmy, give it up, buddy. So that would be one example if you wanted to go after that. Ad hominem, we're not going to see. That's just an attack on someone, just that's unrelated to an argument. Ad populum is a bland emotional appeal. You could actually apply that into the Carter thing, because come on. Bland emotional appeals, and also just these imagery of the wildlife that gets that way. Then there are other things that we talk about. So again, some more Latin words: post hoc, which actually is short for post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is basically an argument that says because this happened, then the other thing happened. It means literally after this, therefore because of this. So just because it's sort of a fallacy of chronology and equating a causality to chronology. Okay, just because I watched a movie after dinner doesn't mean that eating dinner made me watch the movie. Okay, simple things like that. There's another word called syllogism. Syllogistic is a logical deduction based upon inferences and asserted propositions. So a false syllogism, and this one we're going to see today, is where you draw a deduction that's illogical. Okay, the classical example is cats die. Yes, they do. Caesar is dead. Yes, Julius Caesar is dead. Therefore, Julius Caesar was a cat. Okay, that kind of thing. You can pick that up in some of these arguments because people, even though they might be making a sophisticated text, sometimes can fall prey to those types of what we call false syllogisms. False syllogisms. So, by the way, when you look up these words online, you're going to get all these Latin and Greek terms. Don't. If you really want to study that stuff, God bless you. Become a philosophy major at college. That's a beautiful thing. But for our purposes, we just want to be familiar with really the types of fallacies and not necessarily their specific names. So a few more things that come in: a genetic fallacy. I don't like this term. It's just like it's a fallacy of virtue or a fallacy of origin. So just because something is made in China doesn't mean that it's bad, because sometimes in China there might be child labor, or we could make that claim. Okay, so you'll see that type of thing. So it's saying, well, it's simply bad because that ignores the substance of an argument is really the problem with the genetic fallacy, and just makes what we back to a ad populum, a bland emotional appeal based upon a generalization. Speaking of generalizations, hasty generalizations is a big problem. You're going to see a lot. So where you take a specific example and then you draw a conclusion for everything based upon that. Okay, that's just an illogical fallacy. Other things we have is like moral equivalencies. So conflating what we mean, bringing things together that are not really comparable. I think you can walk your way through that. A couple other terms is a bandwagon is just because other people do it doesn't make it right. A red herring is to divert from the relevant topic and go and build your argument with a side run around something. Politicians do this all the time. A straw man is to build up an argument of your opponent and then attack that, even though the opponent never had that argument. Okay, it distorts the opponent's argument. Is the big idea. Circular reasoning, circular argument. That's syllogisms, basing a claim based upon the claim itself. Then we have quoting out of context. Slippery slopes are just saying, well, this is bad because, well, it could get worse, and it could get even worse than that, and then it'll be really bad. But you have to prove that, and so they're just making that kind of generalization based upon one bad thing is a what we call a slippery slope argument. Exaggeration, stretching the truth. I like this one. The gambler's fallacy is awesome. Just because it happened once doesn't mean it's going to happen again. Right? You're hoping that the snake eyes will come up again, or won't come up rather. A couple other things we have what's called ineffectual appeals. So to authority, pity, emotion, to ignorance. These are all appeals that it's got to logically support the argument. So if you just want to make people feel bad, and that doesn't mean your argument is good, all right? Just because you draw in an authority on it, that doesn't necessarily mean that authority is relevant to this topic. You have to back up your arguments. Lastly, we've got equivocation, which is a sort of creating an ambiguity, double speaking. I think the classic example of this would be saying stuff like taxes are a headache, aspirin makes headaches go away, therefore aspirin will make the taxes go away. Okay, that type of it's a faulty syllogism basically. And then the last one would be cliche. What's wrong with cliches? Well, the cliches are cliches precisely because they're so overused that they become meaningless. And I want you to remember, my dear Professor Wright, professor of rhetoric, his advice always: when words lose their specificity, they lose their meaning. And that's the problem with cliches. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the tablet, and let's go apply these ideas into an analysis of test 10 essay. Okay, here we go. I'm on the college readiness.college board website where you can get all the practice tests, or at least the currently published 8 ones. And let's bring this up to full screen. And let's get the highlighter going, and let's see what's going on with this particular essay. Just to refresh our ideas here, they tell us that we want to consider in the passage, and this is by Todd Davidson, how he uses evidence, facts, and examples, the reasoning behind developing ideas and connecting claims and evidence, the stylistic and persuasive elements, and we can add in logical elements as well. Word choice, appeals to emotion, to add power to the ideas expressed. Now, I'm going to argue that the choices that this author makes detract from the power to express. Then we go down to the more explicit instructions, and they always put in a little statement about what the person is doing. So read this first. Todd Davidson builds an argument to persuade his audience that the U.S. government must continue to fund national parks. Okay. And then we have to, then this is going to be common language in your essay. Analyze how Davidson uses one or more of the features listed in the box above, or features of your own. There you go. Don't bore them, to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his argument. And then we have that word logic. Be sure your analysis focuses on the most relevant features of the passage, and your essay should not explain whether you agree with Davidson's claims, but rather explain how Davidson builds an argument to persuade his audience. And finally, remember, we're being graded on 3 parts, or rather 3 pieces of the rubric here on the essay. 1, do we understand the text? Do we make a good analysis of the persuasiveness and the expression of ideas in the text? And how is our writing? So let's start walking through this one. So this dude, again, you might want to read this before you watch the video so you're more familiar with it, but here we go. So I got 2014. I know what's going on. And they already told me he wants the government to give money to the national park system. So we don't know who he is. They don't tell us that. Okay, but if you know the Hill, it's a newspaper. So it could be some guy in the government. I have no idea. Okay, so he starts out with the world is an enduring love affair with America's national parks. All right, now you can start right there. Is that a bland emotional appeal? I don't know. Is that true? Do we really? The world has an enduring, okay, off we go. Conceived nearly 100 years ago, the national parks connects us with our shared heritage and tell our nation's stories. Who among us, so we got these rhetorical questions. Who among us has stared into the deep blue caldera, whatever a caldera is, but it's deep and blue, of Crater Lake, looked up at Half Dome as the special time of winter approaches in the Yosemite Valley? I was there in the spring, dude, so I have no idea what that looks like, but it was pretty cool in the spring. Or witnessed the spectacular October fall colors of red maples, oaks, and hickories in the forests of the Great Smoky Mountains. I've actually seen them up in Maine and in the Appalachians and in my backyard. So notice how I'm going to take a pretty cynical attitude towards this dude's essay here. And not been overcome by the incredible, almost magical grandeur that has been preserved for us in future generations. Okay, so all right, dude, we got the emotional appeals. We can see that coming our way. Collectively, our national parks, blah, blah, blah. Historic sites that tells us what they are. So he's giving us some background, represent the very best our nation has to offer. Wow, that's quite a claim. Along with their intrepid and iconic park rangers. Ah, yes, Smokey the Bear. They embody the true spirit of our country, bringing our nation's history to life. Wow. Check this out. So we've been told that the world has a love affair with America's parks. We've been told that you will fall into a state of magic looking at hickories and Half Dome as winter approaches, and that this is the very best our country has to offer. That's quite a claim this dude is making. In addition to being stunning and educational, national parks are immensely affordable destinations. Okay, so now he's moving into his argument where he's going to talk about, the parks are so wonderful for these reasons. Now we're going to talk about how the parks benefit, it looks like, the economy, okay? Tourist attractions. Each year, 300 million people visit the parks, 401 parks, blah, blah, blah. These parks are a significant component of the U.S. tourism economy. So is that true? I don't know. A significant component. They stay in nearby hotels, rent, dine, blah, 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 generating more than $30 billion in spending and supporting 250,000 jobs. That sounds like quite a bit. National parks are clearly a winning economic scenario for visitors, the economies of nearby towns and communities, and ultimately our nation. But now these prolific, okay, we got that word but, okay, so now he's going to contrast. So he's presented how wonderful they are and how important they are to the economy, and how he's going to say, oh my God, they're at risk. So we have to be upset. We, the readers, need to be worried about this. Over the last decade, national park budgets have seen a steady decline in funding and currently suffer from annual operations shortfall of more than $500 million. Okay. I suppose that's true. We have to assume it. National Park Service budget for construction and maintenance is only half the amount necessary to maintain park sewer systems, roofs, foundations, and road services. Okay. Now the sequester cuts. Now they give us they tell us what that is down here. So the sequester is a cut in spending by the federal government. Okay, so this is obviously, we have a little context here. This is obviously part of a congressional budget fight. Cut another 153 million. Before Congress left for recess, each chamber shared a funding proposal with completely opposite visions for our national parks. Okay, so he's now stating what the opponents do. So I don't know if this is a straw man or not, but he's going to tell us that, some people are bad because they don't want to fund the parks the way he wants them. All right, blah, blah, blah. We want to get on the road to recovery for our parks. So the across the board sequester cuts. Parks have fewer rangers to protect and maintain historic sites, great visitors, blah, 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 and maintenance is essential for park. Okay, so he's made those claims. Now he's saying this is what's going to happen if we don't fund it. Okay, there's an irony to all this because national parks are one of the best investments the country has ever made. In addition to supporting the U.S. travel and tourism industry, which is the cornerstone of the U.S. economy, which is a cornerstone, not the, that represents 1.8 trillion in economic output and supports 14 American jobs. Every dollar invested in the national park generates 10. Okay, I have a couple problems here. He told me here that we get, 30 billion in economic activity around the parks and 250,000 jobs, but now they're in a shortfall of $500 million. But now he tells me that, wait a minute, every dollar invested generates 10 in economic activity. So what do they need the money for? One, that's sort of a logical problem there. He's drawing, I don't see how that supports the claim. The other thing is, wait a minute, 1.8 trillion, what is 30 billion out of 1.8 trillion? In the tourism industry? It would seem that parks are a pretty small part of that, frankly, and 14 million jobs rather than 250,000. So parks are, I'm not sure what those numbers are off the top of my head. You guys are the math people, you do that. National parks are veritable economic engines, so I don't think that claim is supported by those facts. Supporting the livelihood of businesses and communities across the country. I suppose that's true, but it's not the only support of those businesses and communities. And is it really a veritable economic engine, given that the numbers he presents are really not that impressive? Okay, so he's made his argument. He tells us that the parks are wonderful and beautiful and magical. He tells us that they create jobs. He tells us that Congress is going to cut the funding and destroy the parks. And then he tells us that parks are part of the tourism industry, and he gives us numbers on that. I'm going to object to that. And then he tells us now, well, this is called an ethical appeal, an ethos. Last year, President Obama called for a national travel and tourism strategy to make the United States the world's top travel and tourism destination as part of a comprehensive effort to spur job creation. The White House, so, he's saying President Obama, the White House. So obviously the White House agrees with him. Released a strategy just a year ago, an important step that officially elevates the travel and tourism industry to what it should be, a national priority. Okay, so here's a problem as well. It also recognizes the industry for its fundamental contribution to our economy, national security, and public diplomacy. He's just made the claim that national parks are necessary for our economy, our national security, and public diplomacy. That would be called a false syllogism, a hasty generalization. Because parks are part of tourism, because tourism is an important cornerstone of our economy, parks are therefore a cornerstone of the economy. And then he adds in national security and public diplomacy. I don't see any way he can make that connection possibly here. And then he ends up, our parks can play an important role in making the U.S. a top travel destination. As the park system, so we got to feel it's its birthday. So the park system's having a birthday. We have to be very happy about that. There should be a robust national park centennial initiative to help attract international visitors and provide needed. So, okay, all right, that's cool. Businesses and governments do that all the time. The centennial, bicentennial is important. Yeah, I don't have too much of a problem with that. Okay, so looking through this, I my approach, and maybe I'll give you an example of how I would write an essay on this. If I do, I'll post it on the website. But we've understood what he's done. He's built up. We've outlined his strategy here is to get the emotional appeal going, then bring in the statistics and back up his argument there, and then talk about, well, oh no, it's going to be a problem because we're going to lose all those great benefits of parks and the magic of parks if we don't fund them. And then he's going to re-support that by saying that, well, the parks it'd be a waste because the parks are one of the best investments the country has ever made. Pretty dubious claim there, I would suggest. And then what that part of tourism is so important, and then he makes a dubious claim that they are because it's really a small sliver of the tourism economy. And then he makes that ethical appeal to President Obama and the White House and the priority, and then he makes this incredible claim that thereby parks are a fundamental contribution to the economy, national security, and public diplomacy. Okie dokie. You don't have to be as cynical as I am on this. You could actually write to support what a great persuasion this essay is, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to look at something and say, wait a minute, this is not working for me. You can do that. I don't know if it would matter, but it seems to me that the readers of these essays are not going to get a lot of essays contradicting the persuasiveness of the passage. I think kids, unfortunately, they look at these passages and they just assume they're authoritative simply because the College Board put them on a test. Never do that. Never trust a test. Never trust a source. Okay. So I guess what I'll do next is I'm going to go over the sample essays that students have written and how they've graded them. And I might also add an essay that I would write in response. You can see how I would create an essay in my analysis of this particular passage on test 10. Okay, guys, hope that helps a lot. See ya.